Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I have Jocelyn joining us, who is also an Outschool teacher. We are going to be chatting today all about Jocelyn's online teaching journey, as well as how she has found success on Outschool, teaching tutoring classes, as well as Spanish. First, let's go ahead and have you introduce yourself. Let us know how and when you started teaching online.
Okay, so my name is Jocelyn. I have been teaching online since August 2019, so it has been a minute, but I began starting teaching online solely with VIP Kid. And at the start, it was kind of just a way for me to be able to travel, be able to see new places and not be tied down to a regular 9 to 5. But I ended up really enjoying it. And the traveling just kind of continued. And so I began working online with Cambly around February of 2022. And then it kind of began to continue to evolve. And then I started teaching with Outschool in June of 2020.
Nice. Did you have teaching experience prior, or was online teaching your first thing?
So never like formal teaching, I would say, but I've always enjoyed working with students. So whether it was like babysitting when I was in college, or I did like an au pair experience where I was living with a family in Spain and I was
Cool.
like informally tutoring their children. And then I actually was working as like a teacher assistant in a Spanish school throughout the summer. So nothing like formally where I went to school to become a teacher. I did my student teaching and taught in the classroom, but I've always enjoyed working with students, and kind of like an after school programs and things like that have always just been involved in teaching, and like not a like professional sense, but well, I guess professional, but you know
Yeah,
what I mean.
it's the opposite of me basically, because I went to school to be an elementary teacher, but
Oh,
you
nice.
did basically everything else. Because there's so many roles in a school. It's not
Yeah,
just,
exactly.
yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that before.
Mhm.
So awesome, awesome. Okay, so I know you mentioned you love to travel. How do you kind of balance creating your schedule for Outschool and then balancing like teaching, traveling, and just life?
Yeah, so it has definitely been a learning process, and it's been kind of nice because when I first started, I was just teaching and traveling and working with VIP kids. So the hours that I could work with VIP kid, like I had to teach early mornings. It was my only option. So I was able to kind of create like a very standard schedule that I could just take with me wherever. And then I would just have to adjust the hours depending on the time zone that I was in.
Mhm.
And then when I added Cambly, I had a bit more flexibility because I could teach during daytime hours and I could kind of teach whenever, and I didn't have to put in my time super ahead of time. So I kind of just did that on a week to week basis. So it was really flexible. But then, of course, without school, I am teaching mostly like multi day classes, ongoing classes where I want to put that schedule kind of further out in advance so that students can find me. And then I want to keep a consistent schedule so that the kids stay with me. So now what I do, because I kind of need to have more of a standard schedule, is I think about the time zones that I'm going to be living in. And because my boyfriend also works online and he works kind of on an Eastern time schedule, I kind of try and keep my schedule that same way. So kind of relatively between the hours of like 10 and 5 o'clock Eastern time. And then I just adjust depending on where I am. Like we were in Puerto Rico, which was like an hour ahead of Eastern time. Now we are in Mountain time, which is 2 hours behind. So it definitely takes a little getting used to, but I think if someone's considering and thinking about teaching without school and maybe doing some traveling, is thinking about the time zones that you're going to be in for at least 6 months and trying to make sure that your schedule is not going to be either ridiculously late or ridiculously early, depending on where you are situated.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I didn't know you were in mountain time. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
As of like 3 weeks ago.
wow. Yeah, because I'm Eastern and that's all.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
literally never travel when I teach, but that's awesome. That's a really good tip, actually. Think about it a little bit ahead.
Yeah.
Now, I know on Outschool you tutor and you teach foreign language, which I think is super cool. Why did you decide to focus on foreign language?
So since I had my start with teaching English as a foreign language, like that was kind of my start. And then when I started on Outschool, I was like, you know what? Like I like teaching English, but I myself had studied Spanish starting maybe when I was like in sixth grade through college. I've always enjoyed traveling to Spanish speaking countries to improve on my own language abilities. And I just find that anytime I'm speaking Spanish, I'm like way more animated. I'm like so super pumped. Like I genuinely love it. It's something that I am super passionate about and probably more passionate about Spanish than I am about English when it comes to actually teaching it. And I know one of the things that I think about, like in my own journey learning Spanish, is I just wish that I had started earlier, because I feel like in the States, we really don't start learning languages until like sixth grade or like high school. And it's so late, and you're kind of like, wow, this is lame. Um, so I kind of wanted to give that opportunity to younger learners, and Outschool was kind of the platform where I could do that, where I didn't need the teaching degree. I just needed the experience, which I have a degree in Spanish. I've traveled, so I have all of that experience in order to be able to teach it. And I just wanted to give that opportunity to younger students and then make it like a stress free environment for them, because it can also feel kind of stressful learning a new language. Like I remember sitting in a lot of my own classes just being like, don't call on me. Okay, I need to like write it out so it's perfect. Like I feel so much pressure to speak perfectly. And I want to make my students like not have that experience where we're going to have fun. It's okay if you don't remember the word. Let me know. I'll help you. We'll say it together. So just kind of giving them a really fun introduction to the language.
That's awesome. I love that you said that because it's funny. I hate language. I mean, I can speak English. My dad is from a Spanish background, so I should know Spanish, but I do not. And then in high school, I had to take French, and it was kind of like you said, once you're at that age, you hate it. But then
Yeah.
if you start, I don't know, I just love how you said that. If you start at that younger age, they can really get it. And then when you start younger as well, you usually get it better, like quickly. You're able
Yeah.
to acquire the language a lot quicker. So
Yeah,
that's
your brain is like a sponge. You're just like,
literally.
yes, give me all of the language. I don't care what language it is.
And then they're not as scared to practice. Once you get older, you're
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah,
feel
you're so self-conscious.
weird.
When you start in high school, you're just like, oh my gosh, if I say this wrong, what are people gonna think? And it's like, it doesn't matter, but it's just all of these other outside pressures that we put on ourselves. So starting young is key, I think.
It is. I like that. And that's clearly a niche. So how do you think kind of like niching down helped your Outschool business altogether, I guess?
Yeah, so I definitely think it helped because when I first started, I was actually giving art classes because I have a degree in art history and then I have a degree in Spanish. Super random, just
Yeah.
following my passions. Um, and I did like some guided drawing classes, like which were fun, and it was mostly one time classes, but I just really wasn't seeing the traction. And then I finally built up the courage to be like, you know what, I'm gonna try and teach Spanish. Like I think I can do it. I think I can make it fun. Like let's just try it and see what happens. So I put out some one-time classes, began to see some traction, and was like, okay, I can turn these into multi-day classes or ongoing classes. And so I think sometimes with Outschool, it does make sense if you're not really sure what you want to teach, to kind of just like put out feelers and try a few things and then just see what kind of sticks and see what you actually enjoy teaching. Because I thought, oh, I think drawing classes would be fun. And then for me, I was like, you know what? I'm not really enjoying those classes as much as I am the Spanish classes. And I'm seeing more traction with the Spanish classes. I'm more animated because it's something I actually really enjoy teaching. And so it kind of just continued from there. So like I think when you first start out, it's okay if you kind of gotta try a few things, see what's gonna stick, and then figure out what you really enjoy and where you're seeing the traction and continue from there.
I agree. I agree. That's a good tip that if you're a newer Outschool teacher, not necessarily picking one niche, and
Yeah.
if that niche doesn't work, it's okay to try a different niche. Like I think back to mine as well, because when I started, I was thinking like kindergarten style classes and then like kind of arts and crafty kind of things.
Hmm.
And I hated arts and crafts, like with passion. I hated it. Teaching it. It's fun to do like activities that are a little educational in person, but I did not
Mhm.
like doing it on the computer. And then I thought I would do like more like mathy science things, and that wasn't my thing either. I liked like ELA and reading. So
Mhm.
I kind of tried different things out and then I kind of figured out my niche. But that's a really good
Yeah.
tip.
Yeah, because you wanna make sure that it's something that you actually enjoy teaching and that the students are gonna enjoy, because if it's a class that, oh, you get lots of bookings, but you hate teaching, like, what's the point? You know, you kinda have to find that middle ground, and
Yeah.
sometimes it takes a little while to figure out, but once you do, it's just like, and you can, like, focus on that one thing and make sure that it's, like, really good instead of having your fingers in, like, 10 different things, and then, nothing is really working out because 'cause you're
Yeah.
just too thinly stretched.
Yeah, and your students can tell. Like they can tell when you love a subject and then when you don't really like something. They can tell.
And they'll probably tell you too, depending on their age.
They clearly could, definitely. So, I've actually had a few people reach out kind of wanting to teach another language on Outschool, but they kind of struggle deciding whether to teach it fully in English or a little bit in English, a little bit in the foreign language. What do you do? And like, do you have any recommendations for those that want to teach foreign language?
Yeah, I think there's a few factors that you should definitely consider. Some of them would be if if the students that you're teaching all have the same first language. So, for example, on Outschool, the first language of all of my students is English. So, for me to do a little bit of instruction in English and then the majority in Spanish, it works for me because all of my kids have that knowledge of English that we can then kind of bounce off of and turn, grow with their exposure to Spanish. But if you are, for example, if you're working on Cambly, you're going to have students from all over the world and they might not know English. So you can't kind of fall back on that knowledge of English, and you will have to. Well, actually, on Cambly, you teach English. So it would make sense that all of the instruction would be in English. But if you don't share that same native language with your students, then you kind of have to give all of the instruction in the target language. So that's definitely something to consider when you're kind of like, okay, like, should I do kind of a mixture or just focus on that target language? Another thing that I would say to consider is the level of your students. So, for example, if you are teaching a more advanced level of the target language, then I would say that the majority of your instruction should be in that target language, unless maybe there's a really complex grammar concept that your students really aren't getting and you think that it would be beneficial for you to fall back on English if they have a knowledge of English. For my beginner students, I do my best to do a lot of the instruction in Spanish. And I find it's easier when we're doing something that's focusing on vocabulary because I have lots of pictures. I, can like point to the, here's Mike. He makes lots of appearances in my Spanish classes
Oh,
as well. He lives on in my Outschool classes. But there's a lot of things that you can do so that you don't have to be like, oh, sad. We say sad in Spanish as triste. Like that's too much. That's too much. Just be like triste. Oh, use TPR, use your those other resources. But then with my beginner students, if I do have some more complex grammar things that I want to express to them, I sometimes will fall back on English or just look at each of my students, see if I see any deer in the headlights, and it's like, okay, I would rather them understand this than feel completely lost and feel like they can't ask me a question about it. So I will clarify in English when it's necessary. But I do think there's a lot of value when you limit the use of English in your classroom or limit the use of another language besides the target language because they're there to learn the target language. So I think it's okay to use a little bit of English, but to really try and primarily do it in that target language because that's why they're there.
right. Do you include that in your listing or your class description usually?
Yeah, so in it's kind of like further down. So who knows if if parents make it that far. But I do say, I do believe that the majority of instruction should be held in that target language. However, if your child is confused or if they have questions, I have no problem clarifying in English. And I think that parents you're going to find parents that that like total full immersion, and then you're going to find parents that are like, oh my gosh, my child is so lost in that full immersion class. I prefer if they speak a little bit of English, or I prefer if a lot of it is in a language they understand, so that they can make those connections or whatever. So I think regardless of what you choose, like, definitely be clear about it in your description, so families are made aware of, and you're going to find parents or families that are going to lean one way or the other regardless of what you choose.
Okay, yeah, that's good. And then I guess too, you could think that you can be flexible. So if one of your classes, everyone is doing really well with the target language, maybe you focus on that. But if you have more struggling kids, maybe including English with the target language would make.
Yeah, and you can definitely kind of tell sometimes if students are like, "Oh my gosh," like if I have a new student come into one of my ongoing classes and, I'm saying, "Oh, ¿cómo estás?" Like, "How are you?" And like I'm holding up my little things, and they like look to the adult that's next to them. I'm like, "Okay, I'll clarify in English so that they know." So you can kind of take cues from students too, like approach it completely in that target language. And then if they're like, they're looking at somebody else, or they're looking at you like this, it's like, okay, no, like, because you want to make sure that they feel comfortable, because the more comfortable they feel, the more open they are going to be to the information that you're giving them. And they kind of have to feel at your class too. So I think it's okay to have a little bit of English. I definitely speak English in my classes.
It's a good tip because I had no idea what to tell people when they ask. I don't know because I don't speak foreign language. I haven't even
Yeah.
taken ESL. I kind of left the whole ESL world.
Yeah, and with VIP Kid, it was all in English, but I think something that we sometimes forget is that, yes, our classes with the students were in English, but they also had supplementary classes with a Chinese teacher. They
Yeah.
probably were also learning it in school. So that time for them, it was supposed to be, that was their full immersion part of it. And while, yes, you're teaching those different concepts and things, they were partly exposed to those beforehand, so
Mhm.
that's, they were prepared when they came to you, versus if Outschool might be the only time that they're practicing Spanish, they might not have any other kind of exposure before then. So I think that's important to kind of consider
Yeah,
too when
that's true.
choosing.
Mhm. Good, good. Good tip. Thank you for that. Another question I get, and this is different for every teacher, is when you're having your tutoring classes or even just your Spanish classes in general, do you create your own resources? Have you purchased curriculum? What do you kind of do for that aspect?
So I find a lot of value in creating my own resources. So I use Canva pretty much to create the majority of the things that I do in my classroom. I also use some tools like WordWall and Nearpod, but the bulk is at least initially designed or created in Canva. And I do that, one, because I actually like really enjoy the creative side of that. I find it really stimulating. I know some people don't, but I definitely enjoy that. I'll purchase like um, I will purchase clip art from TPT so that I can use that in some of my creations as well through Canva. And I find a lot of value with that because I know if I'm the one creating it, nobody else is using it. So when kids come to my class, it's inherently going to be completely different than any other teacher, because it's they're my resources, I've created them. And so I find that that gives me a lot of freedom with what I'm doing in the classroom, and I don't have to worry about my class being like super similar or like identical because I purchased something on TPT and now I'm doing, maybe the same resource as somebody else. But it's also because I just enjoy creating things. So
Yeah. I'm like that too, and I didn't think I was gonna be that way because I was a classroom teacher before, and I was so used to being provided curriculum, and then I was a big like, I used to purchase stuff on Teachers Pay Teachers
mhm.
for my own classroom, but then when I started, because when I first started with Outschool, I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna try creating my own things," because, Teacher Pay Teacher sellers are not too big on, like, letting online teachers always use their products, and then I realized I loved it. So it's kind of like a thing that if you've never tried it before, definitely recommend. You
Mhm.
might like it more than you think.
Yeah, just dabble in it. See how it feels. And if you don't like it, like, you can go to TPT.
Yeah.
You can find resources that are for commercial use. So there's
Mhm.
options if you don't
Yeah.
love it like we do, but you should try it.
So of like if someone has no idea like how to start with Canva or Nearpod, are there any good resources that can kind of help them out with that?
Yeah, so I definitely think initially, like, go to YouTube. Like, YouTube has so many tutorials, so many different resources and things like that. Like, so I think that was definitely like the starting point if you're just like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And then I do actually offer a Canva workshop. You can find more information about that on my website. And so it's completely self-paced. There's lots of different video modules. We go through kind of an overview of Canva if you have no idea what to do with Canva or what Canva is, and then how to begin creating resources and games and things like that for your classroom. So completely self-paced, and then also with some live Q&As so that you have opportunities to ask me questions. So initially I would say if you just want to dabble a little bit, YouTube is great. And if you're looking for something a little bit more intense or a little bit more in depth, you can definitely check out that Canva workshop that I have.
Perfect. Yeah. Canva's the best.
Yeah, it's
Canva,
so
Canva.
good.
Start with
It
Canva.
ma
That's what I always
it makes everything so easy. It's like dragging and dropping. You can make, like,
mm,
presentations, you can
yeah,
make little videos. Like, I definitely use Canva a lot in my classroom, but also, like, for Instagram or for my website or YouTube thumbnails, like, you can definitely use it for Outschool, but also for a lot of other really
everything.
cool things too.
Literally anything that has a computer, I use it.
Yeah.
So yeah. Good, good. So I know on Instagram you also chat a lot about like creating fun games, trying to make your classes engaging. What are like your three favorite resources, games, or websites you share with your students?
Yeah, so with my Outschool classes, I would say that the majority of the time I am either using Nearpod in my classes,
Mhm.
I'm using WordWall, which is no longer approved to send links to your students through WordWall, but you still can screen share. So if you're using WordWall, you can't send a WordWall link to your students on Outschool, but you can still screen share it. So I still use that to make like spinny wheels, like open the box games and things like that.
I've never even
Um,
played with that. What is it? Like,
so it's essentially a website where you can create different activities. You can either create printable activities or you can create like virtual online games. So they have like a spinny wheel, which is really cool. If you want to pair that with like a bingo board that you made or something, you can like spin the big wheel, screen share it with your students, it'll land on something. You can enter text or images. So I mainly use WordWall for creating like random generators, either random word generators or image generators that I then pair with a board game that I've created on Canva or a bingo game or some other kind of thing. So it's a really nice one to pair with other games.
I get it. Perfect. And so you said, sorry, that was like a side question,
That's okay.
but you had mentioned, so you use that one. I know you use Canva. Are there any
Yeah.
other, and then Nearpod, you said, right?
Yes. Yeah. And again, I feel like I'm always like merging all of these resources because I'll usually create my slides and my presentations on Canva, but then I'll upload them to Nearpod. And then through Nearpod, I will convert the slide so that students are able to draw on the slide. They could complete a worksheet on the slide. Um, they have a few interactive games like Time to Climb, where you like answer questions and
Yeah,
like
I've
climb
heard
up this mountain.
that.
So there's a lot of different ones they've drag and drop and stuff like that. So I feel like I'm usually like merging
Putting it all
all
together.
of these
When
three
you
tools.
do, because I've never, okay, I started to use Nearpod and it was just too overwhelming for me. So I was like, I'll do this later. But are you creating Nearpod resources for like your one-on-one, or is that more of your ongoing or multi-day that you do?
So with my one-on-one classes, I usually give the parents the option because I know I have some students that love Nearpod, they get it. It's like super fun. And then I have some students that are just like, what is this? Can I just have the worksheet so I can do it on paper? So there's a lot of different like personal preferences. So with my one-on-one classes, I always kind of give them the option like, do you want me to send you worksheets? Do you have access to a printer? If you don't, I can screen share and I'll figure out a way for us to complete the activity, or I can send a Nearpod link and they can complete it on there. So they'll let me know. And then for my like ongoing classes, my small group classes, I always send the Nearpod link, but then I let families know that they can like choose to do it on the Nearpod link. I will also send them worksheets so they can print it out. So I say, if you don't want to use Nearpod, here's the worksheet you can print, or have your child bring like a blank sheet of paper to complete the activity. And then if you don't have access to a printer, you forget to print, or you can't figure out Nearpod, I will screen share the presentation and we will do it that way. So I have like so many backups because I just know some parents are going to, you know, be able to have the time to figure out Nearpod, get it set up, and other students won't. So I have like lots of backups,
Yeah.
very flexible.
That's a good tip because I was just talking about that on my Instagram. I think it was like a week or so ago. It's just thinking about if a student can't do something, what is something else you can make them do? Or if
Yeah.
they finish something early, what is something else? Like having backup
Yes.
for everything, just in case to keep your class.
Yeah, for sure. I know I made a YouTube video maybe a few weeks about Nearpod and like the different backups because I feel like there's a lot of pressure, especially when you're first starting a new online tool. Like you want it to work so perfectly. And chances are like something's going to go wrong because it might be new for you or it might be new for the students. So to have those backups, so you're not wasting time like during class trying to figure something out, you can say, oh, no problem. I'll send you a document with instructions for next time you can look over. Today, I'm just going to screen share it and we're going to do it that way, you know? So having those backups, it makes you feel a little bit more confident going into it because you know when things don't go wrong, right, because they will probably go wrong at some point, you got to back up.
Mhm. Nice. Okay, good. All right. Well, the last thing we were going to chat about, we've had a really good chat, I think, today. If someone is wanting to start teaching on Outschool today, what are probably, or even just teaching online, because you have experience with a lot of different companies,
Mhm.
what would kind of be your top 3 tips for them?
So I would say if somebody is interested in teaching online, but maybe feels like a little hesitant or like a little nervous, I would want them to know that we are all really nervous when we first start. Like we might be on Instagram and be like, yeah, online teaching. And yet, like, but no, we were all really nervous when we first started and we might still be nervous. I know when I have new students in my classes, I still get nervous. So, so note that that's totally normal. And, you know, just kind of go for it and see what happens. And your first few classes, you know, might not go perfectly, but the more that you do it, the more you're going to like learn little tips and tricks and things that you can do in those moments. And you're just going to get more and more confident as that goes on. So, no, we all started where you are. It's okay. That's totally normal. But my advice would be to just start, just try it, find a mentor if you want a mentor, go on YouTube, do the research that you need to be able to feel more confident going into it, but just start, just try it. I know a lot of teachers say that, but just start. See what happens.
Good. Is there any other tips, or is that probably your biggest tip?
That's probably my biggest one. Um, oh, I would say another tip would be to try and not get super caught up in like all the technology of it. Like I know even during our conversation today, we were talking about Nearpod, Canva, WordWall, and that can kind of sometimes make it feel more overwhelming. So when you do start, don't feel like you have to have all of those online tools that you have to do 10 different things. Like just start with something that you feel comfortable in, maybe like a Google Doc presentation or a Canva presentation. Keep it simple and then just know that you can always change and adapt as you go along and as you feel more comfortable with like just the teaching aspect or interacting online with students, you know, like baby steps are okay.
Yes. And I'm even thinking about that. I mean, it's a little off track with your class setup because I love how your class setup is able to just take it from one place to the other, but it's not something intricate. I mean, I finally made a class setup because I
Yeah.
officially like have an office area now. But I think when I first started, I used to just have like I don't even know what it's called, but I used to have this thing on a board that I would just carry around, and I
Yeah.
just plaster it behind me, and that's what worked. So
Yeah, I know. I have like my little signs here. Like it's kind of like an awkward space here. And of course, there's a window. But like when I'm traveling, I can't always be like super picky with my spots because like I need to be near an outlet. My boyfriend's working in the other rooms. Like we need to be in separate spaces. So like you don't have to do something fancy. Like I think on Instagram we see like the best of the best, and it like looks so cool and put together. And like that's awesome if you love doing it and it's feasible for you, but you can also just have a totally plain background, like take up a lot of space on the camera. I'm sure you'll be very animated and like you don't need all that extra stuff to get started.
yep. So, so true. So true. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this great insight on Outschool, teaching Spanish, creating engaging lessons. I really, really appreciate all the value you shared. If you're interested in connecting with Jocelyn, I'll have all of her links, her Instagram, her YouTube, that Canva workshop she had mentioned. All of that will be down below for you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was a lot of fun, Alejandra.